Hey everybody, welcome to the Fortress of Rock here Friday night, December the 9th, 2022, episode 69. As always, very appreciative, very happy to have you aboard, spending a little bit of your Friday evening or perhaps another part of your weekend with me as you catch up with this Friday night's episode of the Fortress of Rock. Segment 1, as always, is News of the World, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen, as we cover all the news happening in the world of rock and roll. Got to do some follow-up here on a couple stories that we've been covering here pretty religiously over the past few weeks. Number one, of course, Taylor Swift fans are starting to get together. A group of them are now suing Ticketmaster over the mess that we've been talking about here recently involving Ticketmaster's inability to deal with the demand of Taylor Swift's current tour. Their verified fan program failed miserably. A lot of fans left out in the cold, despite having the pre-sale codes, the verified fan codes that they were supposed to. And of course, it got so bad, it got to the point where Ticketmaster could not even go through with the normal public on sale, normally on Friday mornings at 10 Eastern time. All the pre-sale mess from the previous Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, between crashing the system, between not keeping scalpers from getting into the system, blocking the real fans from being able to get their Taylor Swift tickets. So now you've done it, Ticketmaster and Live Nation. Now you've upset Taylor Swift fans to the point where they're suing you. And I hope they do serious damage to that monopoly that I hate, Ticketmaster and Live Nation. Of course, I know Taylor Swift does not technically fall under the purview of rock and roll, but we were also talking in the past about the dynamic ticket pricing mess before what happened with Taylor Swift. The Bruce Springsteen, the Blink 182 debacles. So, again, this Taylor Swift situation ties into those of us, you and I, who go see concerts each and every year. I'm hoping somehow, some way, somebody, whether it's this lawsuit, whether Congress gets involved like they've been saying they're going to, somebody brings down Ticketmaster and their stupid, exorbitant policies and exorbitant fees. Because it's pathetic and it's ridiculous that they've been allowed to continue like this for decades. Now, of course, another story we've been talking about recently is Journey. We've talked about lawsuits involving, most recently, Neil Schon and Jonathan Cain involving a Journey credit card. Before that, it was Steve Perry, their former lead singer, was suing them. Before that, they were firing classic era members Ross Valerie and Steve Smith because you want to talk about paranoia. Neil Schon and Jonathan Cain thought that Smith and Valerie were running a coup d'etat, trying to take over Journey. So now Journey has hired a new manager to hopefully smooth things over here, fix some of these problems. They've brought in Def Leppard's manager, Mike Kobayashi. So we'll see if he can fix the problems with Journey. And of course, in this day and age where people blame everybody for everything and never take personal responsibility, An Australian woman was hurt at a Guns N' Roses concert, 30-year tradition, where Axl Rose throws his microphone into the crowd at the end of the show, usually after an encore of Paradise City. Well, of course, there was a woman who wasn't paying attention, got smacked in the face with the microphone, posting pictures of herself on Instagram or Facebook or wherever. Oh, look, I've got black eyes. I've got a cut on my nose. This is awful and terrible. It needs to stop. So, of course, one stupid person ruins it for everybody. So now Axl Rose says what you would expect. In our namby-pamby snowflake culture, Axl Rose says, I can't do this anymore. We're going to have to stop a 30-year tradition of me throwing my microphone into the crowd at the end of the show. And again, I'm just going to say, I'm tired of one person ruining it for everybody, whether it's an old woman in the 90s spilling hot coffee on herself, or whether it's this Australian woman not paying attention, not there to catch Axl Rose's microphone and walk out with an unbelievable souvenir. Instead, she gets bonked in the face and ruins the 30-year tradition for all of us who go see Guns N' Roses. Now, we've talked a lot recently about legacy artists selling their publishing rights. And of course, it makes sense. Hopefully, they're taking this money and they're setting up trust funds or college funds for their kids and their grandkids. You would hope that's what they're doing with it as they get older and the light at the end of the tunnel gets closer and closer. It makes sense for them to do this. So Peter Frampton is the latest, as he sold his publishing rights to BMG, who right now seems to be a very major player in these types of transactions. Now, Peter Frampton's publishing rights, I'm not sure what they're worth compared to some of these other ones that we've seen recently. Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan, Motley Crue. I can't believe they're worth nearly as much as the others that I just mentioned, but undisclosed amount. Peter Frampton sells his publishing rights to BMG. And of course, we can't seem to get through a couple weeks anymore here in 2022 without talking about Dolly Parton's constant foray into the world of rock and roll. And you guys know I've talked about it. I'm not going to go down that road again. How I think she played everybody in her election to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But now we have an update on her quote-unquote rock album that she, of course, promised she was going to make if she did indeed get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And good for her on that front. At least she's going to keep the promise. That being said, it's not sounding like it's going to be that monumental or that creative of a project. Another pet peeve of mine that I bring up every once in a while here, albums of cover songs. Lazy artists who don't want to put in the time or the effort, and they whine and they cry. Gene Simmons of Kiss has done this recently. They say, what's the point of making new music? Because, of course, new music doesn't sell anymore, and we don't make the money by going into the studio and creating like we do going out on tour and playing our greatest hits. So Dolly Parton's rock album, and again, quotes around rock, we'll see. It looks like she's just going to, for the most part, do an album of covers of some of the greatest rock songs of all time. She's mentioned the Rolling Stones, Satisfaction. She's mentioned Prince's Purple Rain, Freebird from Lynyrd Skynyrd, and of course she wants to get Robert Plant and Jimmy Page together so she can do a cover of Stairway to Heaven. And I don't know about you guys, but it just sounds to me like she's cherry picking the biggest hits from the 70s and the 80s. You've got to admire her. She's got guts. I'll give her that. But I still think in many ways she is a very manipulative, deceitful woman. A PR genius, but that doesn't mean we should be kowtowing to her when it comes to her place in the world of rock and roll. All right, as always here in News of the World, we have to talk about the latest when it comes to tours. I'm not a big Pantera fan. Of course, now, because of tragedy and death, it's not really the classic Pantera lineup, but a lot of people looking forward to Pantera as they've just started their reunion shows. They played their first one here a week ago, last Friday, December the 2nd, in Texcoco, Mexico. And of course, we've talked about the fact that they're going to be one of the opening acts on Metallica's big 2023-2024 No Repeat Weekends tour. So for those of you out there who love Pantera, it's all systems go. Unfortunately, Aerosmith couldn't get through their Las Vegas residency, had to cancel the last 4 shows, December 2nd, 5th, 7th, and 11th, due to Steven Tyler being ill. That first show, that first one they canceled on the 2nd of December, they could only give 2 hours notice. We all know Steven Tyler has had a lot of personal issues lately when it comes to substance abuse and going through rehab. Of course, we all hope that he recovers. We all hope that he gets back to being in shape and being in good health. We just talked about it, though, when it came to the story about publishing rights. Steven Tyler's in his 70s. At some point, everybody has to face mortality, and with what he has done to his body, I start to worry more when I hear stories like this about how much time Steven Tyler has got left, and if he is not still pushing the issue, and if he's still not having trouble when it comes to substance abuse. Now we know U2, one of the biggest bands in the world, doesn't go out on tour very often anymore. They usually mount a massive world tour maybe twice a decade. And they're another band that has slowed down creatively. They say they've got one album done, but they want to do another harder album first before they release that one that's already in the can. But it doesn't sound like we're going to see anything from U2 in terms of a tour in 2023, at least if they go out. It's not going to be with their drummer, Larry Mullen. Sounds to me again like we've got a person, not like Steven Tyler in terms of substance abuse, but somebody who's worried about their health, somebody who's got health issues they've got to deal with. So Larry Mullen, drummer for U2, will not be involved in any touring plans the band might have in 2023. Now we've got News of Skid Row and Buck Cherry going out on tour together, doing a co-headlining tour. Tickets, I believe, just went on sale for most of those shows today. They got one coming nearby me in Fort Wayne, where I just was. Pierre's, where I just saw Steel Panther. That review coming in segment 2. Prices are a little bit high for me when it comes to this double bill, though. Skid Row does not have Sebastian Bach with them anymore. And while I love the new album, The Gang's All Here, I'm not paying $45, $50, for a standing room ticket. I'm not going to do it, especially when I'm not the biggest Buck Cherry fan in the world. I've already seen them once, and that's more than enough for me. Now, there's other people I know out there who love Buck Cherry, just like with Pantera, not really my thing. But if you want to see Skid Row and Buck Cherry, you better get out there now, check your local venue, and get tickets because, like I said, I believe they went on sale today for a lot of these shows, if not the entire tour with Skid Row and Buck Cherry. And finally, the stadium tour, the successful stadium tour that just wrapped up here with Motley Crue, Def Leppard, Poison, and Joan Jett. We have talked about the fact that now Motley Crue and Def Leppard are going to be going overseas to continue that tour into 2023. No Poison, no Joan Jett, but it was just announced that there have been 6 American dates added to this new tour. I believe they're late summer 2023, and while again, no Poison, no Joan Jett, at least to this point, Alice Cooper has signed on to support Motley Crue and Def Leppard on the 6 American dates that have just been added to this new international tour for 2023 from Motley Crue and Def Leppard. Now, if you've never seen Alice Cooper, I have to admit I've seen him once, and he impressed me much, much better than what I was expecting. Respect Alice Cooper a lot. Not a big fan, not a diehard fan. I'm much more of a Motley Crue and Def Leppard guy. But the one time I did see Alice Cooper in the past was when he opened for Motley Crue on their quote-unquote farewell tour. Remember that? Contract signed in blood that they would never tour again. But Alice Cooper was better than Motley Crue when I saw him. And again, I'm a Motley Crue guy. I grew up with the Crue. Shout at the Devil, one of my favorite albums. So for me to say that Alice Cooper was better than Motley Crue live, that should tell you something. Very cool that Alice Cooper is going to be out there with the Crue and with Def Leppard. Check them out. If you didn't get to see the stadium tour as it finally got going here in 2022, see if you've got any shot at going to one of these 6 dates here in North America coming up in August of 2023. So you can check out Alice Cooper as well as Motley Crue and Def Leppard. All right, kids, that's going to do it. News of the World is done for the week. But we have got so much more to go. And of course, segment 2, breakdown. I've already mentioned I will be reviewing Steel Panther live from Pierre's last Wednesday in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Couple songs to review. holiday song from The Offspring, and an old lost track from The Doors. So hang out here with me for a little while longer here on Friday night, December the 9th. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. This is the Fortress of Rock, and I will be right back. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Fortress of Rock podcast with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Of course, that was segment 1, The News of the World, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen, where we look back at the past week in rock and roll and all the news and all the controversies that you deserve to know about. Next up is the heart of the show, the meat and potatoes, breakdown, where we are going to review all the new songs, all the new albums, all the new concert tours, the shows that I've seen personally. Stay tuned for that. Of course, we're now available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Hang out, kids. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Fortress of Rock, Friday night, December the 9th, 2022, with the Maestro, Kevin Crane. It is time for Breakdown, our tribute to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Of course, segment 2 is where we review concerts, new albums, new singles, and songs from the bands that we love. Steel Panther, live at Pierre's, Fort Wayne, Indiana, November the 30th, 2022. Now, this is the second time I have seen Steel Panther. Saw them last year in Indianapolis in the Egyptian Room at the Murat. So, not too far removed from my last Steel Panther experience. But they've got a new album coming out in 2023, On the Prowl. We've talked about the first single, which they did play in this show. They've got a new single, the second release, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Did not play that live, just hit today. So if you've got Spotify, check out your release radar. It's probably going to pop on there. But we'll give you an update on that a little bit later on. Now, the cool thing about seeing Steel Panther here in 2022, comparing and contrasting to the 2021 show, which was almost exactly a year to the day from this show. Yes, they play their favorites, the ones that the fans expect to hear. Asian Hooker, 17 Girls in a Row, Death to All But Metal, one of my personal favorites, Community Property, another one of my personal favorites, and then, of course, the song they always seem to close out with, the fan favorite, Glory Hole. Yes, they are crude, and I'm skipping some of the songs that would be a little bit risque for me to say here on this podcast, which I'm trying to keep clean. So if your kids are listening and wanting to talk to you about rock and roll and listen to me talk about rock, I'm not going to offend anybody with brutal language. And some of the songs from Steel Panther do have some risque language. Now, they decided in this show, as opposed to the 2021 show, to delve a little bit deeper into some cover songs. Yes, I know I just complained in the last segment about cover songs, but that's more when it comes to studio work. A good cover song or two during a concert, different animal altogether. And of course, We just talked a couple months back about seeing Judas Priest. Ironically, I was wearing my Judas Priest shirt to the Steel Panther show, and they decided to break into back-to-back covers of Judas Priest, breaking the law, and You've Got Another Thing Coming. So it was awesome. And they brought on stage one of the founding members, I believe, of the band Grim Reaper, and he played along with them on these cover songs. So that was really cool. And then, of course, Michael Steele, the lead singer for Steel Panther. If you've never seen a picture of Steel Panther, they, of course, play off the 80s Motley Crue Poison look. They do everything, the hair, the neon, the pastel colors, the scarves tied to the belts, the leather pants, the whole thing. Steel Panther is basically an 80s tribute band, a hair metal tribute band from the 80s who does their own material. And most of it's about sex. But they do honor every chance they get the guys that helped shape them, that helped create them from the 70s and the 80s. Of course, Judas Priest being one of those bands. Then, of course, there's Ozzy Osbourne. Now, after the Judas Priest covers, their lead guitarist, Satchel, got on the mic and started talking to the crowd. Lead singer Michael Steele disappears to the back. And again, he's got the long blonde hair. He's got the bandana. Looks like a cross between Bret Michaels and David Lee Roth. So Satchel talking to the crowd, and then he decides to start playing the riff from Crazy Train. And we're like, oh, cool. Another kind of partial cover song. But then we see coming out from the back, Michael Steele has changed his look almost completely. He's put on those round John Lennon type glasses that Ozzy Osbourne likes to wear. And of course, he's hobbling around. We know about Ozzy and his back issues, and we'll get more into that in segment 3. But Michael Steele does a fantastic impression of Ozzy Osbourne, and he gets up to the mic, got all the mannerisms down, and of course they break into a full-fledged cover of Crazy Train with Michael Steele channeling his inner Ozzy. And of course, there is a stuffed bat sitting on the drum riser that, of course, he grabs at the end and rips the head off said stuffed bat. Yes, Steel Panther loves to go over the top as often as they possibly can in 90 minutes. Now, since this was the second show in a row that I've seen them during the holidays, they like to perform their Christmas song, the stocking song. And all I have to tell you is it involves a lot of metaphors involving stuffing stockings. And I'll leave it for your imagination after that. The Steel Panther's a fun show if you get the joke. If you're not a hypersensitive snowflake and can tolerate some rude, crude, fun humor mixed in with some great rock and roll, then I highly recommend you get out to see Steel Panther. Now, they just announced a whole new set of tour dates for 2023 in support of the new album On the Prowl. So I do know that they are going to be playing Indianapolis at some point in the spring, I believe, of 2023. So check them out at the Murat, the Egyptian Room. If you're down in Indianapolis, no matter where you are, though, look up their webpage, see where they're playing near you, and check out Steel Panther. Great, great show. Again, 2 years in a row. Only complaint, my own fault, along with my friend. We have a particular place that we like to stand at Pierre's in Fort Wayne, just off to the side of the stage. Avoid the massive crowds that sit there in front of the stage. Usually it works out very well for us. When we saw Mammoth, WVH, and Dirty Honey there, when we saw Tom Kiefer and LA Guns there, great vantage point. Didn't work out that well this time because Steel Panther, the way they perform, they don't move around quite as much as those other bands where you get a nice look across the stage at everybody, staggered so you can see the bass player and the guitarist and the lead singer. They pretty much all stayed in a line, so we got the bass player and we were blocked from seeing the lead singer and the guitar player, Michael Steele and Satchel, a lot of the time during the show. But again, these things happen. Our fault. Our bad. So, Steel Panther, looking forward to the new album. And as I mentioned, I'll have some more news about Steel Panther and new music from them coming up in the fourth segment. Wrap it up. 2 songs to review for you this week. We mentioned we were going to have some holiday music for you. Give you a little taste now, and then, of course, we'll have some more coming in the next few weeks. The Offspring have put out a Christmas song, a standard, not a new one. This is more of a standard, a remake, if you will. Bells Will Be Ringing, subtitled Please Come Home for Christmas. Ugh. Yuck. If you're going to do a Christmas song, and this seems to be a big thing now with bands, performers, it doesn't matter if you're country, you're pop, hip hop, hard rock, metal. Whereas we talked about in the last segment, the reluctance of bands and performers to go into the studio to record new material. They seem more than willing, year in and year out, to go into the studio to record a quick Christmas song or two and cash in on the holidays. I'm not trying to be cynical about it. Sometimes it does work. But you've got to bring something different, or at least you've got to bring the personality of the performer or the band into the song to make it unique, to make it your own. And that's my big complaint here with Bells Will Be Ringing from The Offspring, is that it's just bland, dull. There's no punk energy like you would expect from The Offspring. It is a paint-by-numbers cover of this old holiday standard. So to me, it's a big waste of time. I would say stay away from The Offspring's Bells Will Be Ringing. Unfortunately, again, it's just so dull and so boring. It's really disappointing. Now, a song that was not disappointing, it's not a classic by any stretch, but the lost track Paris Blues from The Doors. There's a great story behind this song. Ray Manzarek's kid, of course, got a hold of the only master tape copy, recorded over parts of it, so they've had to reconstruct the song. But it's cool as hell to hear the great Jim Morrison again, like an old friend you bump into at a coffee shop and you can reminisce. Now, Paris Blues is not by any stretch a Doors song that you're going to be able to put up there with Light My Fire or Roadhouse Blues or The End, but it's still an intriguing, cool, interesting blues song. And again, just to hear Jim Morrison's voice on something we haven't heard before gives me chills, but in a good way. So check out Paris Blues from the Doors. Probably the last quote unquote new song we'll ever get from them. So in a way, this is a very important salvaged recording, because I do believe this will be the last unreleased song we get from the Doors. All right, that's going to do it for Breakdown. Of course, I have to go out to the garage now, get my DeLorean, get it fired up to 1.21 gigawatts as we get ready to go back in rock and roll history to look at anniversaries, birthdays, significant moments in rock history. Hang out through a quick promo. I will be right back, and then we will go back in time. All right, now that we've looked at the current state of music in our breakdown segment, it is time to climb into the DeLorean and travel back in time to look back at moments in rock and roll history, birthdays, deaths, anniversaries of song and album releases. It is time for I Wanna Go Back, our tribute to Eddie Money. Stay tuned. And as always, we're on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcasts. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fortress of Rock, Friday night, December the 9th, 2022. We have covered the news of the world. We have covered breakdown reviews, Steel Panther and the Doors and the Offspring. Now it's time to travel back to yesteryear, to moments in rock history, birthdays and anniversaries, significant moments that help shape the music that we love. Now, obviously, you have found the Fortress of Rock somewhere, on some platform, on some host. But you have options, and this is the time each and every week where I let you know what those options are. You can find the Fortress of Rock on Spotify, Anchor, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Stitcher, Amazon Music, and Audible. Also, don't forget to check out our Facebook page. We have a couple fun things that we do each and every week, in addition to, of course, having links to our podcast episodes. It's Friday night, so of course we have started the Weekend Rock Project on our Facebook page. This weekend we're asking for you to chime in with your favorite movie soundtrack of all time. And of course, every Sunday is New Music Sunday, where I will put out a link to a YouTube video, whether it be an actually expensively produced music video like we used to get all the time back in the 80s from MTV, or it's just a lyric video. Still, we like to give you at least one new song each and every Sunday to check out. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Feel free to leave comments. Let me know what you think. And of course, we have to acknowledge our sources for a lot of the ideas, especially here in segment 3 as well as segment 1. 3 main sources: ultimateclassicrock.com, thisdayinmusic.com, and for all the Van Halen news, nothing this week on Van Halen. The Van Halen news desk, though, is my source for all VH gossip tidbits. If David Lee Roth does something new, Sammy Hagar does something new, they'll post it. I'll pass it along to you. But keep in mind, when I embellish stories and news of the world, when I embellish and give opinions on some of these moments in rock history that are coming up, and I want to go back, keep in mind that those opinions are mine and mine alone. All right, I mentioned I want to go back. Segment 3, tribute to Eddie Money, the late, great Eddie Money. We're going to start off with anniversaries. We mentioned this earlier in a roundabout way, a comical way, because of the imitation, the impression that Steel Panthers lead singer Michael Steele does on tour currently with his band when they do Crazy Train, and he comes out acting like Ozzy Osbourne. Well, part of the impression is, of course, walking very slowly, shuffling across the stage, because we know Ozzy has been dealing with neck and spinal issues here over the last couple decades. And today, going back 19 years, is why. December the 9th, 2003, over in the UK, this was the day that Ozzy went to the hospital after having a quad bike accident. And that's what's messed up his spine and his neck. Of course, we talked here earlier this year about him having to go in for a very serious procedure. It looks like everything went well, so maybe finally, at least as best as he can put this physically, emotionally, and mentally behind him. But it has been 19 years today since that initial incident occurred. December the 9th of 2000, U2, again, we talked about them earlier in the show, and Larry Mullen opting out of touring in 2023. On this day in the year 2000, 22 years ago, U2 made their very first appearance on Saturday Night Live. Of course, this is a music show. We do have to acknowledge the fact that SNL is a great showcase for musicians. But all I'm going to say is it's been about 20 years since it was actually entertaining and funny. December the 9th, 1989. Number 1 single in the United States was Billy Joel's "We Didn't Start the Fire." Now, I'm a big Billy Joel fan, but this is not one of my favorite Billy Joel songs. I prefer stuff from The Stranger, 52nd Street, Glass Houses. That being said, it's still hard to not compliment Billy Joel for coming up with this song. It is catchy beyond belief. It bridges the gaps between the different generations and eras of music fans that Billy Joel had and has to this day. It's kind of like, in a way, REM's It's the End of the World as we know it, in that it's just a very quick rant, rap, chant, rattling off, in this case with Billy Joel, news headlines going from the day he was born until the day this song was released. Or at least the day the song was recorded, I should say. You can take that for what you will. To me, it's intriguing and interesting, but at the same time, that part of it wears on you pretty quickly. But again, you cannot deny how catchy that song is. Another unbelievably catchy song, as we go back to December the 9th, 1978. And you guys know, every once in a while, I will break protocol here, discussing mid-70s R&B, funk, disco, music that I grew up with in my formative years. Chic's Le Freak was number one in the US on this day in 1978. Another unbelievably catchy song. And Chic was massively popular during the disco era. I thought they were cool. I liked them. But then again, as I said, dirty little secret for the Maestro is that I actually liked a lot of the music in the disco era, whether it was the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack, whether it was Chic, A Taste of Honey, and Boogie Oogie Oogie, Heat Wave and Boogie Nights. So anytime people want to call me a music snob, I tend to point out that, okay, so I hate Bob Dylan and I hate Neil Young and I love these bands from the disco era. So that makes me a music snob? I would think that makes me the opposite of a music snob. It makes me brutally honest in my opinions and my tastes when it comes to music. To me, a music snob is somebody that follows Rolling Stone blindly and without dissent. And if Rolling Stone says the new Neil Young album is a classic, the music snob will go, well, of course it is. It's Neil Young. Instead of having the guts and the balls to say, no, it's not that good, and Rolling Stone are just a bunch of sycophants and idiots. But I digress. Another one of those bands we're going to get to in a few minutes from the 70s is the Commodores. And I know I seem to talk a lot about them lately. We're going to bring them up one more time here in a few minutes. Another guilty pleasure, if you want to call it that, of mine. Our final rock and roll anniversary to discuss here this week on The Fortress is December the 9th, 1972. This is the 50th anniversary of the release of Neil Diamond's Hot August Night, where he recorded one of the shows that he had, I believe, over a 10-night stand at the Greek Theater out on the West Coast. And this was the album that solidified him as a dynamic live performer. I have never gotten the privilege, never had the pleasure of seeing Neil Diamond live. Unfortunately, like with a few other acts, Tom Petty, it looks like the ship has sailed, and I'm not going to be able to enjoy the experience. I know some friends who have, they swear by how awesome Neil Diamond was in concert. I believe it. Neil Diamond, of course, a master songwriter, going all the way back to when he wrote songs for the Monkees. And then, of course, became an ultra successful solo artist. But this release 50 years ago with Hot August Night took him to the next level, proving to people that he wasn't just a songwriter. He could be an unbelievably magnetic presence on the stage. All right, birthdays. Got 4 birthdays to talk about. Let's go oldest to newest. I mentioned the Commodores. Not going to go into a lot of detail. I've done that recently for various other anniversaries and birthdays, but December the 9th, 1946, he is 76 years old today. One of the main members of the Commodores, along with, of course, Lionel Richie. Walter Orange, the drummer and vocalist, sharing vocal duties with Lionel Richie. Walter Orange is the voice you hear on Brick House. As I mentioned, 76 years old today. Happy birthday to Walter Orange from the fantastic Commodores. December the 9th, 1968, 54 years old today, Weezer guitarist Brian Bell. I have a weird relationship with Weezer. I've always tried to like them. I respect all of the efforts, the homages they do to the old school rock and roll, in a way much like Steel Panther. The one thing I remember from my only trip to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which we're looking at least, we're looking decades back, when I paired the trip to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with seeing a Genesis show in Cleveland, was Weezer. When you walked into the lobby, and I don't know if it's still there, but when you walked into the lobby back then in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Weezer's huge lighted sign from the tour that they had just come off of, which was a blatant homage / ripoff of Van Halen's logo. That's one of the few things I remember being impressed by at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In terms of their music, hit and miss. Blue Album is pretty good. Hash Pipe's a great song off, I believe, the Green Album. But they've never been that alluring to me, that enticing to me, where I've really been able to sit down and say, I've got to listen to the new Weezer album. I don't know if I really find Rivers Cuomo to be that great of a frontman, that charismatic of a frontman. So don't dislike Weezer, but they're just not one of my favorites. But happy birthday to Brian Bell. Now we bump it up a year to December the 9th, 1969, 53 years old. Jacob Dylan, of course, Bob Dylan's son, and more importantly, to me at least, leader of the Wallflowers. Now, the Wallflowers I do like, and I like them a lot. I can't count them among my favorite bands, but they're in that second tier. And I will say that Bringing Down the Horse, that album, is to me a classic. It is one of the best albums I've ever heard. Of course, everybody knows One Headlight, Three Marlenas, 10th Avenue Freeze Out. No, of course, that's Bruce Springsteen. We're talking about 6th Avenue Heartache is the Wallflowers. But I think there's a tie, a connection. I think, to me at least, when I hear the Wallflowers, 6th Avenue Heartache, I think it's almost an homage to Bruce Springsteen and 10th Avenue Freeze Out. But that's just me. I might be reading too much into things. But that album, Bringing Down the Horse, is spectacular. It is fantastic. I've always respected Jakob Dylan's work much more than his father's. Jakob Dylan seems more down to earth, lacks the pretension that his father has carried with him for decades and decades. Happy birthday to Jakob Dylan. Then finally, for Green Day fans out there, December the 9th, 1972, Green Day drummer Trey Cool turns 50 years old today. I believe I've mentioned in the past, Green Day is a great band in terms of albums, studio work. I've seen them live once. Can't stand Billy Joe Armstrong. He is such a jerk in concert live. He's one of those performers who is going to curse and swear and tell you how to think about politics and social issues and waste your time while you've paid $120, $130, $150 for a mediocre seat. And he's going to badger you with his political views. And I can't stand that. But why let Billy Joe Armstrong's idiocy ruin the fact that today is Trey Cool's birthday? Happy birthday, happy 50th to Trey Cool. All right, kids, we're going to pull the DeLorean back into the garage. Our time traveling is done here on the Fortress for another week, but we'll do it all over again next Friday. But we're not finished yet. One more quick promo, and then we look ahead to what we're going to be talking about over the next month or so here on the Fortress of Rock. So stick around. Wrap It Up is next. I will be right back. Well, we hope you enjoyed our trip back in time, looking back at the anniversaries, the classic moments in rock and roll history. But of course, the DeLorean works both ways. So now we have to move forward. The last segment here, as always, on the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane. Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. It's all about the future. What's coming out here in the next month or two? What songs? What albums? What concert tours? That's why we call it Wrap It Up. Thanks to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Thanks to you for hanging out. Here comes our final segment. All right, kids, just a few minutes left here on the Fortress of Rock, episode 69, December the 9th, 2022, and then you and I can both get back to our Friday evening. Whether you're listening to music, watching a movie with the family, with friends, enjoy yourself, enjoy your weekend, stay safe, be happy and healthy. Now, I know I've been warning you guys over the last few weeks that this time of year, new music tends to dry up a bit. We're still going to figure out ways to make it work until we get to February, where I know we've got a whole lot of new music coming out. Steel Panther, Godsmack, Rival Sons are coming, I believe, in March. We've got Metallica in April. So we'll have new music for you somehow, some way over the next few months until all those albums start to hit. Next week's review, we're going to go back a few months, not real far back, but we never got a chance to really delve into and review the full album, the new album from Ugly Kid Joe, Rad Wings of Destiny. So that's going to be our featured music review next week. I'm still, as we get closer to Christmas, I still plan on getting into the spirit a little bit and reviewing Everybody Knows It's Christmas from the great Chris Isaak. Hopefully it will be much, much better than the Offspring's Christmas effort that we talked about in segment 2. But now this is Chris Isaak's second Christmas album. His first one was phenomenal, so I have a lot more faith in Chris Isaak. In terms of new songs, Metallica's lead-off single from their upcoming new album, 72 Seasons. We mentioned it last week. Want to take another week to listen to it a few more times. First single is Lux Eterna. That should be on the slate for next week, along with Ugly Kid Joe. We mentioned Steel Panther teased more new music from their new album, On the Prowl. Brand new single, 1987, the second release off of On the Prowl. I've listened to it once already. It is one of those reminiscing type songs, but of course it has that raunchy twist. Not quite as much as they would normally put in, but it's a look back at the 80s, name dropping Judas Priest, Van Halen, Scorpions, Whitesnake. Got to listen to it a little bit more. So within the next couple weeks, we will look back with Steel Panther at 1987. And then finally, I will get to this. I know I've promised it for a couple weeks. The Steve Vai project, Vai Gash, of course, Gash, late singer Johnny Sombrato. Back in the 90s, they put together a bunch of songs, much more rock-oriented, straightforward rock stuff than what Steve Vai normally does with his solo works, where it's mostly instrumentals. We've talked about the first single, In the Wind, and we'll probably do 2 for 1. What we'll probably do is review In the Wind finally, along with the just released second single off the Vai Gash project, a song called Busted. So we'll probably review both of them at the same time for you within the next week or two here on the Fortress of Rock. Then, of course, finally, we could call this a group project if you want. It's that time of year. You put together your list of your favorite albums and songs and concerts of 2022. I will too. I am just starting my year recap, my 2022 look back, best albums, best songs, best concerts. So probably early January, we're going to go through all of that for you. So start compiling your lists, and you can compare and contrast to mine. And hopefully 2023 has even more great music than 2022 did. There were some high points in 2022. There were some low points. Some albums and songs that exceeded expectations and some that fell miserably flat. So, once the calendar flips to January, I will spring my best of 2022 on you. But that's going to do it for the Fortress here. Friday night, December the 9th. As I said, go out, have some fun, or sit in the house where it's warm and watch a cool movie. I highly recommend Bullet Train. Clerks 3 is another recent release that I think is fantastic. I've heard great things if you want to go out to the theater about Violent Night. So you've got plenty of options. And of course, always you have the option of just dropping the needle on an album or popping a CD into the CD player, laying down on the sofa in the living room and just listening to some good rock and roll. Take care, everybody. I'm the Maestro. We will talk again next Friday night.